Thank you so much, Susan, and thanks for the introduction and the words before this. It's a real privilege and honor to meet so many people working in this community, parents, caregivers, and to meet the patients as well. It means an incredible amount. And so my goal is to sort of give you sort of a zoom out, higher level overview of the rare disease community. Translational science is getting medicines to people, some of the opportunities and some of the challenges that live there as well. Science definitely moves slowly. One of the reasons it moves so slowly is because there's a lot of science happening all the time, and a lot of it fails. I don't know if you know this, humans are terrible at making medicine. We mainly fail, and I don't mean like we have a 50% success rate. I mean, we have a less than 1% success rate in making medicine. The reason NCATS exists, we'll talk about, and how we try to help there. And I work at the National Institutes of Health, which is part of the government. So we move at the speed of bureaucracy. It's a whole different level, speed of science. But I wanted to give you some context for that. So the US NIH has about a $50 billion budget. I grew up in Australia, I'm Australian, and that's more than the entire Australian military budget. So to give you a sense of how committed US taxpayers are to making a difference to health, that's absolutely massive. The worst thing I ever did was when I met Susan. She came to a National Institutes of Health Rare Disease Day, and I did do not do this. I said to her, genuinely believing it to be true, I could hear an accent, and I was like, "Are you from New Zealand?" And that did not go well. But we made up, and I'm really honored that I could be here today. So that budget, just to give you some context, 90% of that budget goes out to American universities and American hospitals. It funds research, it funds clinical trials, and then about 10% of it stays in Bethesda or at the National Institutes of Health for research. We have the world's largest clinical research hospital, and that is all there for all Americans, for research groups to engage and interact with, for patients to engage and interact with on clinical trials. So that's why those resources exist. The public health challenge we work on at NCATS is rare diseases. So you know what? These numbers are very round and not accurate because it is so difficult to track. But we know there are over 10,000 rare diseases, and most of them don't have, many of them, I would say most of them don't have what you have, which is a coordinated community and a foundation. Sometimes it's a mom and dad and the only child in America that's ever had a disease. Sometimes they're more common. And our job is to work with all of them because, while way less than 5% of rare diseases have cures. And as I've already told you, not only are we bad at making medicines, it takes a long time to make them. If you want to make a new medicine and it's working out, 10 to 15 years. And as I said, we're pretty crap at it, is normally what I would say at a science meeting. So we focus on rare diseases for lots of really good reasons that you know and understand well. One of the reasons we work in this translational science space on rare diseases is a really important point to make, which might sound confronting, but I'll walk you through it after I say it. To the non-NIH world, to the private sector, rare diseases are not worth curing. And I don't mean those people aren't worth curing. I mean from a commercial point of view, from a return on investment point of view, there is not a model for a pharma company or a biotech to make a medicine and bring those treatments to patients. And so our job is to recognize that there are many, many diseases that are curable now, and many more that take a lot of work, but that we can develop cures in partnership with others, and everything we do is in partnership with others. To fill that gap between the patient diseases that are more common, where there is a way for the private sector to create those medicines, and then we work with academics, with clinicians, with foundations, with biotechs, to do what needs to be done to get them to the point where they're willing to take them on their own into the private sector and get the treatments to patients that they absolutely need. So we all have connections to rare diseases. I wanted to share two with you. I have two nephews with very different rare diseases. Cystic fibrosis. This is sort of like the success story we all want for every rare disease, and the total lack of understanding about how to treat rare disease cases. So I have a nephew with cystic fibrosis, Cohen. It's the most common rare disease. There are multiple medicines to treat children with this disease now. In my lifetime, cystic fibrosis treatment has been completely transformed thanks to a pharma company that developed and continues to develop new medicines. And then over here is Archer, who reminds me a lot of this community, more severe in terms of the neurodevelopmental delay. His diagnosis started with having a thing called tetralogy of Fallot, which is basically all the arteries and veins wired incorrectly in your heart, and so he had open heart surgery at 6 weeks to unplug them all from the heart and plug them back in without the tangles. And he's a beautiful little boy, but a very rare disease, missing 30 to 40 genes. Every child is different. They're spontaneous. It's not heritable. And so it's been interesting as a scientist doing this for a long time then to have these two boys enter our family sphere and to learn how different it is for my sister to be a parent of a child with a rare disease and all of the challenges that's presented there. So when you're thinking about medicines, I'm going to touch on a few topics. I'm going to talk about generally what takes for medicines. I'm going to demystify drug repurposing a little bit. I'm going to explain what we do at NCATS in that space and how we work with others. And I'll touch at the end just a few comments on genetic medicines. A little bit of it came up earlier, so I'll breeze through that. So to get a medicine, to have a treatment, the step one is really understanding the disease. And I know this makes sense, but once you've understood the disease, or enough of the disease, the idea is that you develop a therapeutic strategy. You might say, we understand mTOR, really complicated protein, but actually massive knowledge about mTOR thanks to NIH funding exists. And you could say, well, we think we have some ideas for how we might be able to treat this disease. You've got to be able to find therapies, you've got to be able to test them, and you always have to be able to show to the FDA that new therapeutic candidate is a good idea, that it will probably work, and that it's safe. You've got to work out how to manufacture it. You've got to work out how to transport it. You've got to work out how to sell it. There are a lot of steps that take place here that are translational science challenges, and all of them require people with very different expertise. And all of this should be done, and this is what the SKS Foundation does, speaking to clinicians who are conducting natural history studies, understand the natural course of the disease, know what a clinical trial would look like, what would they be measuring, and work with a rare disease foundation, which as you know, you all have because you're in the room, that is connected with all of the people with that rare disease so that they can coordinate and get news out to the community. So you have a lot of pieces that a lot of rare diseases don't, which is really amazing, and it's been really wonderful to listen to all the talks today. So from an NCATS and a National Institutes of Health point of view, the NIH does funds two things very strongly. Understanding the disease, basic science. How does biology work? How do the proteins in your cell work when they're working? What's gone wrong when they're not working and that might be causing a disease? And then at the other end of the spectrum is getting things into clinical trials, clinical research, treatments to patients. And the bridge between them is called translational science, going from understanding a disease to getting a treatment for a disease. So where I work on the inside of NIH running a research program, I look after a group of probably about 350 people. And getting from an idea to an approved medicine, you have to hop over each of these hurdles, and I'm not going to walk through all of them, but it requires, as I said, people with a lot of very different disease expertises. I've got project managers, I've got patent experts, I've got biologists, I've got chemists. They're always fighting. How do you make them get along? Because they have to get along. So mediation, how do you manufacture and scale up and formulate and show it's safe and so plan a clinical trial. And then when you're developing a medicine, if you trip over on any one of these hurdles, you don't, usually in the drug development world, you don't get up and keep running over hurdles, it's over, the race is over. And so that is why, because of the way drug development works, it's a really frustrating world. And then you do this in the private sector and you layer venture capital, funding, ego. And so you've got all of those things as well. So what we build at NCATS is a group of people with all of those expertises. As I said, we have biologists and chemists, people who are really great at working with data and building models of proteins, project managers, and regulatory expertise to talk to the FDA. So that when you understand the disease, the theory is you can move through the pipeline and come out the other end with something. To do this, we don't do it alone. We're not conjuring up, I'm going to work on this disease. So every single project we have is a collaboration where a disease expert or a group of disease experts, like the SKS Foundation has, come together and they identify gaps that they'd like to accomplish, and we work with them to do that. And we have really significant, as I'll show you, investments in the things we have. So the program has only existed, NCATS has only existed officially for 13 years. And so getting approval to put something into a clinic for a clinical trial is called an IND, Investigational New Drug Application. And we have 56 of those and 4 drug approvals as well. So we've been really lucky to have and help others have a lot of success. And so we're always looking for new collaborators, new problems, new rare diseases to partner and with people on. And so this exists once in one place in America, but it's there for the entire American rare disease community, the entire American academic community to partner and bring those solutions to fruition. So one of the things that was very clear to me on Friday and that it makes sense is drug repurposing. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about drug repurposing. And Susan, who waves at me when I'm like just not on time anymore? Yeah, okay. I know I'm not too far in. There we go. Yeah, every time. Okay, yeah. See, there is no forgiveness, though. I didn't say she'd forgiven, just that we've made up. So this is I'll give you an example. So drug repurposing, I think you all know this, but I'm just going to give you one or two slides to tell you it's bloody complicated. And so it takes a lot of work to get from, this drug might work, to patients should get this and how you do that clinically as well. So you have a drug that's approved to treat disease A. The idea that you can repurpose that drug to treat disease B, C, D, E, F is incredibly attractive for lots of reasons. I'll give you a few of those. But I'll show you this. So, this thing you're watching me scroll along, the audio is off because my daughters were complaining to me the whole time I was filming it, is an art/science exhibit at the British Museum in London. It's there, you can go and see it. It is walking along the treatment over a life for one normal, healthy person. And so these are all the pills they're taking. You can see vaccines underneath. You can see family photos. There's one for a male, one for a female. The female one's longer. When you get to the end, it was at the other end, it's actually rolled up because it still wasn't long enough. So this was created because using patient records to create the average, medication experience. And so we want that for every patient with a rare disease. We all know right now there are rare diseases where this scroll doesn't exist, or there are medications that help them with symptoms, but there is nothing that actually treats the underlying cause of the disease. I want to see a little gene therapy needle underneath at the bottom of this. But all of these medicines were made for one purpose, and the goal is to identify other uses for them. So what we've done at NCATS and others have done now as well is we have a collection, we call it, everything has a name in science, the NCATS Pharmaceutical Collection. It's a collection of every drug approved in the US, Europe, Canada, Japan, now Australia even, believe it or not. And so every year we update it. As there are new drugs approved, we update it. And every time we have a new scientific project, we have cells in a dish, whatever, the first thing we do is we test this repurposing library. Number one, is there a medicine in here that looks like it works in that disease biology? Great, let's think about that. Number two, are there medicines in here that are working and they may not be practical for patient treatment purposes, not actually a repurposing opportunity? Might be a cancer drug that requires IV injection. But the way it works tells us a lot about the disease biology of this new thing we're caring about. So you're getting scientific lessons, but the number one thing, of course, we want is the repurposing opportunity. And so I've sort of said humans are bad at drug development, takes a long time. If you start a drug program in pharma, 15 years to approval, usually, at least. There are some great stories of shorter. There are some stories of much, much longer. If you take all of these approved drugs and you test them now, you skip all these chevrons and all of these 15 years, and theoretical can get to a clinical trial or an off-label prescription, which seems to be the flavor of the conversation at this meeting. Whatever the path is to patients having an opportunity to evaluate a drug or have it systematically evaluated in those patients. And so this is something that I know this group's been working on, and I think it's a really great idea. It doesn't work every time. I think you'll hear there's some really nice data coming out of the SKS program. But when it does work, it can give a lot of insight and a lot of opportunity for patients. To do that, I sort of said, why is there only one of these? The reason there's only one NCATS is because you take these libraries, you take the cells you've got on a dish, and you need to test them systematically at different time points. It turns out eventually people faint and collapse if you make them work 24 hours a day. These don't. And so we have this robotic platform that can literally take drugs, cells, interrogate biology any way you want. And everything that you would have in a normal lab, but we have normal labs, are here. And so once our scientists have worked out how to make the cells, how to test the cells in a particular disease model, the robots have the same things around them, and then they do that thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And so this is a one-off investment, and this is why we collaborate. It would be criminal for me to just do interesting things on this robot. It's here for all important problems anywhere in the United States to come and partner with us, because we have all the things that are normally behind locked doors at a pharma company. I was going to say, or a biotech. Biotech don't have things like this, they're too little. So this is an important sort of US investment. So the ideal repurposing scenario, it's a drug that's approved in America. If I find a drug that's approved in Europe, this is an international disease, that's great for that group. And then you start playing whack-a-mole with, where is the drug approved? How can it be prescribed? What is that country's? But it's a great starting point. But there's always this sort of global consideration of, in each place, how can it be taken on? So prior approval in the US, I'm funded by US taxpayers, that's why it says USA. I love the whole world. Access and ability, is there access to the data that already exists? If a pharma company developed it, you would be amazed how unhelpful they can be. All they see is risk. So one of our jobs is to work with companies and write them threatening letters and have nice conversations and convince them that it's important to help all patients. You want the same thing. If you find the drug works, and as I said, it's an intravenous formulation for a cancer drug, that's not going to be practical. If it's pill formulated or an antibody that you can inject, that, it needs to get into the brain. If you have a drug that goes everywhere below the neck and cannot get into the brain, it might look exciting in a dish, but not practical. So we think through all these things. We have all this information about every single drug. And precedent for use in pediatric population. This is always on my slides. It's actually relevant here. The FDA can be, I don't know if this is is it an open meeting?
I think that's right.
Okay. So I know, it's more talking about the FDA than I can swear.
You can say whatever.
Okay. Yeah. So they set a very high bar when it comes to using a medication approved for adults in children. But these are all considerations, and we've done this. I think we're about to have of all things, we're about to have a medication approved in Africa for sleeping sickness that already exists. It's already approved for adults, but it had never been developed for children. And so we reformulated it and got that. We're about to have that approved in Europe. Complicated. So if you've seen one drug repurposing story, you've seen one drug repurposing story is the theme here. So if you say mTOR inhibitors, every single one of those mTOR inhibitors, just like everyone in this room, have a different story. It's owned by someone different or not, it's generic. And so understanding, is it patented or is it off patent? Is it approved or is it not approved yet, but there's an amazing opportunity, and that's where NCATS sits down with people to work through and walk through, what have you got? What would it take to get this into clinical trials? Or maybe it's already approved. What are the challenges to getting access to that medication for patients? So there's a really complicated rubric, and this piece underneath here, this slide is actually for a briefing I gave to congressional staffers. And so I know you'll understand it because they did. And the purpose of, this is a closed meeting. So the purpose of this is to make the point that usually, if there's a commercial opportunity for a medicine, it takes a lot more work to make that widely available for people with other disorders. If there is no commercial opportunity, anyone can take it, but there's no one willing to invest in developing it for patients. Again, that's why we exist. That's why the National Institutes of Health exist. So I'm trying to make the point that we're in that gap between what the private sector does and the challenges of not having many people out there in the public sector who can do this. So I'll give you two little examples of drug repurposing, and the first one is, because I wanted to give you a sense of just how challenging, how much work can go into it, or how straightforward it can be under different scenarios. So there's a lot on the next two slides, but don't worry, I'll just say things and point at one or two things on the slide. So Niemann-Pick, 5 minutes is perfect. Niemann-Pick C is a rare disease that affects the patients that get it. It's about 1 in 100,000 as a neurologic developmental delay disorder. With a fairly challenging survival rate. But what we know about those cells, if you can look at them, you can see this is a picture of regular cells, and a little bucket, a little container within the cells called the lysosome here in patients who have this disease are lighting up big and bright red. So there is a big difference between these cells. That difference is the kind of thing you might say, let's look for drugs that make these red dots go away. That's literally my job. I have a research lab, and that's what I do. That's fundamentally what this is all about. And it was just known since the 90s that this molecule that is not a drug, but is in lots of formulations of drug. When you take a pill, you're not just taking that medicine. There are many other molecules in there that are used to compound it, keep it stable, coat it, make sure it dissolves slowly. Those are all known to be safe in you as well. This is one of those, and it happened to make all of this red go away. And so to give you a sense of long timeline for this one, The natural history studies have been conducted since 2006. In 2011, we decided to work with the foundation to develop this as a medicine, not as a formulation product, and did the work needed to show how to manufacture it, that it was safe on its own, to work out how to dose it, to get FDA approval, multiple clinical trials. But we're talking 2006 to 2025, right? But the good news is there was a recent clinical trial with it, and in pediatrics, you can see really nice survival data in blue here compared to natural history of children who don't receive medication, and hopefully the FDA will approve this. They have the application now. So this is an example, though, that took 15 years, millions and millions of dollars. On the flip side, science has changed a lot since then. So if you're going to discover new drugs for anything, you need a cellular model or an animal model, like a fly that you'll hear about in a moment, and you need a phenotype. A phenotype is a thing like, this has red dots, this does not have red dots. This is the disease cell, this is the wild type cell. And then you try to inquire of as many molecules as you can. Does something reverse this? Is there a repurposing opportunity there? To do that now more and more, we work with cells from those patients through things like blood draws to make what we call a stem cell. And then we can turn that stem cell back into the relevant tissue type. We've got lots of different brain cell types that we can differentiate into, and then we look for that difference. And this is a little example from January to give you a sense of the other side of the coin, so you don't think, oh great, Matt said it's 15 years and it takes forever. This was a screen done in December. You can see the phenotype here for this particular rare disease are the little yellow dots here, are not here. It takes a while to work out what the difference is between a cell line that has been corrected and a cell line that is carrying the disease mutation. And the group screened 2,800 approved drugs, and very quickly, only 72 did something. When you really test them properly, only 10 worked, and there were 3 that could get into the brain and needed to. And you can see the quote down the bottom. That information was shared with the foundation, and the child that literally that particular cell line came from, they prescribed it. Now, we weren't involved in that. We weren't involved in the decision-making conversations. That involves the doctors and the patient, the parents, and the foundation. And they say in this particular disease, this is literally the only kind of information we get, but there'll be more on it soon, that they see a response in that child and they feel really optimistic. So this is going from November screening, January knowing the molecule, April getting feedback, and that's when they told us, we prescribe this to people, and we're like, so it happens even without our knowing. We're not involved in that side of the fence, and that's why places like the SKS Foundation are so important, because they're sort of between us and, except on a wonderful day like today, between us and those patients. So I wasn't going to talk about genetic therapies because it got mentioned, but I do want to say to you that as genetic therapies, and especially CRISPR gene editing, comes along, there are lots of challenges right now. Only one child's been dosed. It can't get into the brain yet. The FDA don't really know how to approve them yet because it's so new, it's kind of breaking their brain. But the good news is it's a very flexible modality. Every single patient's genome can be evaluated to decide whether it's right for them. The field is moving incredibly rapidly. NCATS funds multiple programs for genetic editing, and the things we see scientists report back that we fund is just phenomenal. There are lots of people with lots of money willing to donate and invest in this space at academic hospitals. If this hospital hasn't had an announcement, I'm sure they're just fundraising right now to build one of these, what they're calling genetic surgery centers. It's going to be a major feature of every pediatric hospital. And I would just say you really should start planning and thinking about this now. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll be in the bathroom later on if anyone would like to talk. And thanks for listening.